So, what exactly is two in the box staffing? Well, it's a practice by which you have one allocation for a project, and instead of putting one engineer onto that project, you instead staff it with two engineers working at 50% capacity. They work that role simultaneously and they kind of help each other out in the project. So, why would you do this? Well, first off, redundancy. Each engineer that's on a project is a potential failure point within that project. So you'd want to reduce or eliminate as many failure points within your team as you can. So if you have single threaded projects with one engineer working on each of those initiatives, if that particular engineer has to take, a leave of absence, or as if he's out sick, or if, priorities change, you have the potential to grind that project to a complete halt and stand still. Two in the box staffing allows for you to put two people in the role. So if one is taken away by another priority, or if one, has leave of absence, the other engineer can pick up the slack in the meantime for where, when that other engineer returns, everybody can go back to working at 50%. I recently had a project that took an extra 2 to 3 months to complete because my engineer that was single threaded on the project had a leave situation where it took them out of pocket, and the whole project kind of ground to a halt. Of course, there was documentation available. We had resources on standby that was able to jump in, but we found that there were access and onboarding issues. There were just inherent tribal knowledge that one engineer had, and when they left, everything kind of just stayed in place. So we tried to work around it for a couple of weeks, but then we just went to the client and was like, hey, listen, it's better for us to pause here rather than like trying to pretend that we can we can keep things going. And they completely agreed. We paused the project, waited for the engineer to return, and they completed it in a and they completed it in a great fashion. The second reason is flexibility. So by allocating each engineer at 50% onto a singular project allows for them to go and either take on another project or go work on another initiative that might interest them. I've had several projects that have extended past, 12 months, 18 months. When you get into the 36-month mark, especially if it's a repetitive, ongoing, project type, it can be kind of boring. So I like to allow for some flexibility to go just learn something new or go just experience something new rather than staying on the one effort and then eventually getting burnt out and leaving. Of course, keeping in mind that not all engineers are really good task switchers. You have to identify, I don't want to say the word multitasking because that's not really a thing, but the ability to switch tasks one right after the other is kind of key. Or do time blocking where you say, in the mornings work on this initiative, in the evenings work on this initiative, or in the afternoons. I don't want my engineers working in the evenings. But yeah, that way they can work on multiple initiatives, they can take on other unique challenges and hopefully not get burnt out on that one singular goal and objective. And thirdly is the collaboration tool. I know sometimes when I have engineers on single threaded on a multi-year engagement, multi-year project, it almost feels like they're astronauts getting strung out into space, just tethered with like a singular cord and singular line back to the mothership. And I don't really like that feeling either as an IC or just in team in general. I want to enhance collaboration with my team. I don't want them to I don't want any of my engineers to feel like they are the only ones out there trying to service either a client or a project or an initiative. I always want them feeling like they have the support of those around them. So using two in the box staffing, I'm able to put at least two humans out working on a project, and then that way they can just collaborate, even if there is a decrease in potential velocity. I've actually found that development happens faster just because of that rubber duck situation where they're able to ping off each other, they're able to ask each other questions and kind of reach, solutions and conclusions much quicker than one person would have been like looking up articles and whatnot. So that is a huge benefit. Another point about two in the box staffing is it doesn't necessarily scale linearly. So, meaning, I have a project or two that requires 3, 4, 5, 10 engineers, let's say. I wouldn't put a two in the box staffing situation on every one of those positions. When the engagement grows and it gets large enough, I would actually switch over to like an N+1 redundancy methodology. So where you have, let's say the project requires 4 engineers to stay on it just to meet the velocity demands. I would probably staff that project. I would be comfortable staffing that project with 5 engineers instead, because with the combination of leave, sick time, just random other priorities, that 5th engineer's allocation is actually going to be covered in the other 4. So you don't necessarily have to use it linearly, but it is a good mechanism to say, okay, let's say my project requires 4 engineers. I would take that 4th allocation, turn it into two in the box staffing, and then you still have your 4 engineered allocation, but you have a little bit of extra redundancy out on the end.